Now that we know about agile and lean developments, well, who really cares about waterfall? Stay tuned to find out right here on IT Pro TV.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
That's right, you're right here on IT Pro TV. We're about to take a look at the waterfall development method, and here to help us out is going to be Mr. Justin Dunson. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ronnie.
All right, so Justin, let's get right to it. What is the waterfall method that we have to learn about?
Well, I just want to put that little, like asterisk, buyer beware, caveat emptor, or whatever. We're going to keep this as simple as possible for those of you looking to get your associate certification. We don't necessarily have to be absolute experts. But the waterfall methodology is actually something that to me seems most intuitive. It is how I would approach a project without a lot of thought. And mainly because you go, well, I need to do step 1, and then step 2, and then step 3, and then we're going to plan them all out, and it's all great, right? So I move through each one of these steps without a revisit. I can get all my requirements. It looks good. All right, now that I know what I need, I'm going to design it. Awesome, design's done. And now I'm going to implement it. You never revisit back to those. However, that leads to some problems where, for instance, if you were using a more agile methodology, whether it be lean or agile or being agile, those allow you to revisit those, kind of understand what are the shortcomings that you may encounter during these short durations, also known as sprints during agile development processes, and then make adjustments. In waterfall, things can go awry and you don't know till the absolute very end.
All right, so Justin, in saying something like that, right? Not knowing about it to the very end, that sounds like almost a very monolithic process in which you really can't do anything about it until finally whoever you're actually developing for is having a complaint. That sounds pretty harsh.
It is pretty rough. I've actually worked in systems that used a waterfall methodology. Government, large corporations, those are kind of ingrained because I like to have a timeline. I like to have these milestones. This may be a 2-year project. You have to hit those milestones, right? But also it works in manufacturing. And I think it actually makes a little more sense in manufacturing because I have a fixed good that I'm creating over and over and over again. And then you go, okay, there's my requirements. Here's my design. I'm going to start working toward that. It's just over and over and over again. Everything looks good.
All right, so Justin, with that type of process and what we're actually talking about then, when we do that comparison and we start to think about it, you mentioned the idea of the manufacturing process and what we have. Can we actually kind of visualize that or try to break that down in sections that we'll understand?
Absolutely, and forewarning, I did make a mention when I started talking about software methodologies that I was like, oh, here's some generic ones, and they're going to come back up. If I take a look at my screen here, what I said then actually almost looks exactly like this. These steps are inherent in Agile and Lean, but for Waterfall, what I'm saying is I get all my requirements, my security, my user requirements, my functionality requirements. I've got them all in front of me, right? They're on legal pads or notepads or sticky notes, whatever it may be. And I go, all right, I see everything. And now I'm going to go and design it. What is the solution that fulfills all these requirements? Do I have a login system? Yes or no? Do I have users that need to export data? Yes or no? Is it going to be on private infrastructure, cloud infrastructure? Is this going to be on my computer? Which platform? I start designing around those and I go, all right, this is the perfect solution. Customer signs off, everything's good. And then I go, all right, now developers, it's time to implement. And just FYI, developers may be part of some of these other ones, but typically they have strong kind of siloed roles in a process like this. When I was doing it, I was not part of any of the design or the requirements. I was part of the implementation step, and that's all I was part of. And then we hit those milestones or we didn't. It's handed off, you start implementing, you start building, and you build and you build and then you build, and finally you go, I am finished. It is all over. I need to hand this off, and in this case, I'm going to use Ronnie as a proxy. I'm going to hand it off to Ronnie and say, Ronnie, I need you to test this and make sure everything's good.
Right.
And he tests, and in a perfect world, he goes, everything's perfect. We go, cool. Now we can deploy. We're going to send it to the web, or we're going to bundle it up on a thumb drive or a DVD if optical drives are still a thing. Some of these large settings may still have optical drives, or I don't know, maybe zip drives. I don't know. It's weird. You hand that off, and then you enter into maintenance. Deployment's done, and then they only call you when things go hiccup, hiccup. That's a perfect world. But notice these little arrows right here. Requirements go into design. Design goes into implementation. This is a unidirectional arrow. Testing. If Ronnie found issues during testing, we'll figure it out next time around, right? He'll just make a note of it and go, yeah, that looks good. If you've been around long enough to remember when software wasn't downloaded but was actually given to you on physical media, the Office products were a prime example of this, right? You got maybe yearly releases or longer. Oh man, this Microsoft Word doesn't do what I hope it does, but I can't run any updates. I don't know what. I got to wait to the next edition. To this whole process goes over and over and over again to get the next deployment. They'll just take notes during testing and go, all right, next time, we're going to go all the way back through, but we're going to fix those and make sure we test for those up front. Or make modifications to the design, but only after that first iteration has gone through. Now, this tends to be a little longer term of a project where the requirements gathering and analysis, I mean, we're not talking like a day or two. We're talking, this might be several weeks, a couple of months, maybe even longer than that, depending on the complexity. So these individual stages, they take a lot of time. They take a lot of person power and money indirectly, and then you move to the next phase. So it's financially, it doesn't make sense to move backwards. It is great, though, from a managerial standpoint. You set all these requirements up front, and you go, we're going to hit this in 3 months. Everything's going to look good. We're going to see whether you did it or not.
All right, so Justin, coming from a little bit more of a project management background, this sounds exactly like what we would develop in terms of project management, where we have to start off with the full set of requirements, and we don't allow for any type of scope creep at all. But then it means that we have to come back and redevelop the whole process. Would that be the same thing in software development that you were talking about, the idea of re-releasing or versions? Is that what we're talking about?
This would work greatly if you did not allow any scope creep and you knew the problem that you were trying to solve. Like it's a problem that has like maybe a small deviation from an existing solution. But when you're trying to build something incredibly novel, which we were, you go, well, I just don't know what I don't know. There's going to be hiccups down the line where I go, well, hold on a second. These are competing requirements. I'll give you, this is going to be hyper specific, but I'll give you a case in point. We were tasked with building a visualization platform for weather data. So we either wanted a single point over the last number of years, right? Every 4 hours, 6 hours for the last number of years, or we wanted a global for a certain amount of time or an aggregate of a certain amount of time. Those are different access patterns as far as physical storage goes. Our question was, which one is the 80% use case? Which one happens more? Because our storage solution, our computation solutions, and the technologies which we would pick actually are opposing sides if we're doing single point, long time frames versus global views for a single time frame, just because of how the data is laid out. Now, this is scientific data. I did warn you it was hyper specific, but we couldn't revisit that. We'd already made a promise during the requirements, but we did end up in a hiccup where we're like, all right, we got to figure out what's the best compromise, so to speak. You're right. People like it. It was very boom, boom, boom from a project manager's standpoint. I completely understand why this is, but when you're developing software where you're going to see unforeseen circumstances, it leads to some problematic times because we were in the implementation phase. We could not revise the design. The requirements were already set. So we kind of just went, let's make a compromise and try to move forward.
All right, so Justin, now knowing that and understanding some of the things that we've talked about here, does that mean that we need to go through some more additional full training if we're to get started in some type of waterfall a shop at all?
Now, some people would probably say yes. And I if you want to be, a project manager, it may be beneficial. However, this is a fairly, as I said at the beginning, it seems like a very intuitive approach to solving a problem, right? What do you need to know? What's going to be your solution? Build your solution, test your solution against the requirements, hand it off, and then fix anything that happens in the long term. Seems pretty easy peasy. I would say falling into a team that does this is rather uncomplicated. We had to fill out a great number of forms and paperwork to justify certain things. So that might take some getting used to, but if you're just getting started, don't foresee needing a great deal of training unless you're going to be the manager and you need to know all the ins and outs of this.
All right, so Justin, now that we understand a little bit more about Agile, Lean, and Waterfall, how do we know which one we actually need to choose?
Well, we've seen the bits and pieces, right, over these last few episodes. You go, oh, well, maybe that's it. Wait a minute, maybe that's it. But I think it's the best if we come back, maybe a little bit shorter of an episode, and talk about the decision points that you may make for maybe your shop. You're building full-scale software, maybe like a subscription-based service, or are you just building small tools for network management? Which one of these would work best for your given field? And we'll see what are the decision points, how do I move left, right, up, down, those type things. But I think it's best if we just see those all collectively.
All right, so Justin, thank you once again for helping us understand a little bit more about the waterfall method and put it into some context for us. This type of methodology is great if we're trying to design something that we want to be reproducible or want to actually have kind of a one-off. It actually works fine for us, but we also learned about some of these other methodologies as well. And now we need to take a look at, well, how do we actually choose one of those different methodologies if we want to? Now, that's a great place for us to sign off and get ready for the next episode. So for IT Pro TV, I'm your host, Ronnie Wong.
And I'm Justin Dennison.
Stay tuned right here for more of your Cisco Certified DevNet Associate Show.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.